Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone to this talk today. The topic is permanent values 1 and introduction. Inshallah, we will have more of these talks on other permanent values subsequently. I have given these references at the bottom from where we can look at some of these permanent values. If we are interested, I have given the reference to chapters as well. The outline of the presentation is as following: introduction, some verses of interest, examples of some values across the world, logic of ethical reasoning, values related to ethical reasoning, questions related to values, some definitions, prerequisites to accepting permanent values, attributes of the permanent values, some barriers to permanent values, and finally. So under the introduction, I will say that understanding the world around us based on its value system is important, because then we know where we are and where we wish to go as per the permanent values of the Quran. Now we know that there are individual values and collective values. And then we have to also consider whether we need education and training in that. Then we also are aware of, people talk of materialistic values. They also talk of spiritual values, evolution of values, religious values. We are aware of them. And interesting is that these vary even within the religions. And then there are relative values. That is where we are confronted with more than one value, which one to follow. And permanent values which do not change. And people do talk of permanent values outside the Quran as well, but this is a subject of interest for some other time, where we will see that whether the permanent values of the Quran are the same, which human beings think those are the permanent values. Now, some of the verses I thought over here, we will go through very quickly. First verse, we are aware of it. We have gone over it many times. وَخَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِالْحَقِّ وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Over here, the Quran says that Allah created the heavens and the earth bil-haq. If we look at it, as-samawat wal-ard is an evidence, and bil-haq is a value here. That what is truth. And we know about that, something which is well established and is a proof of its own existence. وَلِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ. Nafs over here becomes a value. And every nafs will be recompensed for what it has done. And we can discuss this once we go to subsequent talks, whether kasabat, whatever we do, and this law of requital, how does it become a permanent value? Wahum la yuzlamun, that nobody is treated unjustly, again it becomes a value. Now next verse is, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat ligad wattaqullaha innallaha khabirun bima ta'malun. We know Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha, that those who have accepted iman. So iman becomes a value here. Wal tanzur, he should see, nafsum, that is each nafs, same nafs here. Ma qaddamat ligad, that they should see, or each nafs should see what they are doing as of today. That is, they should work at a very high consciousness level and then see what effect this will have on their own nafs and of course the world around them. Wattaqullaha, we already know about it. It's related to being muttaqi. Inna Allah khabirun bima ta'malun. Again, there is a value here that we should also become knowledgeable and we should also know what is going on around us. Now, this is an interesting verse which we already know. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. That don't be like them who forgot Allah. Now, and as a result, they forget the purpose of their life. Of course, if we expand it further, nafs means that our own self. If we forget that we have a self which has the potential of going beyond our death, then essentially we are forgetting our own purpose of life. And when we forget own purpose of life, then essentially we live at an animalistic level. So this is something which will come out very clearly once we go into these permanent values. Ulaika humul fasikun. Fasik means that we fall outside the pattern then. We do not live that life which will give us the hereafter. We live a life which ends with death. So this is something very important, and these two verses, we should note them as a reference as and when we talk to others. Now, this verse has also been many times discussed, and I thought we should again have another look. Laisal birra an tawallu wujuhakum qibla al-mashriqi wal maghribi. The Quran says that bir, that is the increasing the eminence of our own self, increasing the consciousness that is at which normal human beings live. If we want to expand it to accommodate the issues which face mankind and understand the values of the Quran, then we should go beyond facing east or west. That is, go beyond our physical self. And what should we do? Walakin al-birra, bir will come to us, man amana billahi, when we will have iman in Allah, wal yawmil akhir, wal malaikati, wal kitabi, wal nabiyina. So Quran over here has given us 5 very important constituents on which we should base our iman. And then now these 5 constituents are absolutely essential. These are intrinsic. We cannot take out one or another one, though in the Quran, these are mentioned at places as 2, 3, and 4, but we should keep that in mind. وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ, that is despite having a love and affection for wealth, because wealth is related to many other successes which we attribute to wealth. Zawil Qurba, Wal Yatama, Wal Masakina, Wabna Sabile, Wasailina, Wafir Rakab. Over here we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items which Quran has mentioned. So these are individual level items or constituents where we have to spend or make our wealth available, which we have earned through our work. And then Quran says we will understand that if we keep on doing this, we will not be able to achieve the purpose because there will be no system of deen. Then it goes to the deen, that is aqamus salata wa ataz zakata. So from individual to collective, Quran is taking us right in one verse. And then it says that you make a commitment, wal mufuna bi ahdihim iza ahadu, that you must make a commitment to Allah for the establishment of salat and zakat and the system of deen. And then Quran recognizes that these are very difficult things. Was-sabirina, so you must have to persist, not for 1 day, for 2 days, for 1 week, month, or a year, for all of your life. Was-sabirina, fil basai wad-darai wahin al-bas, that is steadfastness in pain, adversity, and throughout all such periods, wahin al-bas. It is not 1 day task. And there are a number of verses on that. We will come to them as and when we discuss permanent values. Ulaika allazina sadaku, and that is how we become sadaku and muttaqu. So this is, if we work backwards, if we wish to become muttaqi and siddiq, then we have to work backwards or we go forward. So this is one verse, again, we should remember and quote it as a reference when we are talking to others. Now, examples of today's word, these values. First is, despite having UNO, the powerful countries use might is right and divide and rule as values. So these 2 values, we are very well familiar with them. And this is a man-made system, will always have these values. If you remember in one of the verses, Quran says that Pharaoh used to divide his people. In economic field, corporations exploit poorer countries through bribing, price fixing, market manipulations, political and military influences. IMF and World Bank and their ancillary organs exploit with one value, to make rich countries richer at the cost of poor countries. See, the Quran says that despite having love and affection, greed for the money, we should make it available on others. And over here, it is inverse. Majority decides even if the decision is against the minority. If majority decides in favor of a party which favors rich, then the party gets elected. We can see the value system which controls the party system. Whole concept of quantitative easing is based on favoring the financial sector which favors the rich. Organized bribery across the world to win over contracts and natural resources. We see this battle being fought across the globe every day. Man-made tax laws are deliberately left with loopholes to benefit the rich and powerful, because rich and powerful have their own value system, and their value system dictates that they should benefit from the system. And for them, the life ends with death. Laws are continuously changed and amended to suit the party in power. As a consequence, same human beings are subjected to different laws and values all the time. Constitutions are frequently amended by the parties in power to suit their aims and motives. And powerful countries have organized organs of government to buy politicians, bureaucrats, military leaders, businessmen, academicians, religious leaders, media tycoons in poorer countries. The interesting part is that even the poorer countries do it to other countries, that is, to those countries which are poorer than themselves. Now, let us look at the individual level. We should keep in mind that these are some of the observations which are my own study and my own reading, and we can always add to it. Because man-made system is unjust and corrupt, hence common man tries his best to take advantage of all loopholes in the system as long as he's not caught. And this is where we will find that even in a very corrupt system, we say that so-and-so person who is poor, he's corrupt. But if a human being has landed up in such a system and his needs are not met, then we should think, what should he do? The whole system functions on this assumption that human life ends with death. Most humans function at basic default level. The definition of success in this life is very mechanistic and revolves around status, wealth, family, children, spouses, material prosperity, job, power over others, etc. Human self rarely comes into it. Hereafter only appears in the religious context, that too is based on God's mercy, love, and forgiveness. So in our word, we want to do whatever we like, but in God's word, we want his mercy, forgiveness, and love. All those wrong and evil things for which we curse other human beings in this life, we expect our God to forgive us for that. So this is very interesting, and this is very common among the religious people. Now, this I included from logical of ethical reasoning. If we remember, we covered this aspect very briefly in our critical thinking series. Now, I included it just to look at it again, that human beings do think about these things. It's not that even in a man-made systems, people do not think of these values. To act as to help rather than harm other persons are sentient creatures. How should we act so as to help rather than harm others? So there are human beings who are not mu'mineen, but they do think. Information about our options for action with special emphasis on the information that helps us avoid harming others. Then is inference, judgments about what helps or harms others. Essential concepts, the concept of contributing to rather than undermining the well-being of others. Assumptions, humans are capable of distinguishing ethics from other modes of thinking, grasping fundamental ethical principles and acting consistently with them. Implications, if we behave ethically, innocent persons and creatures are helped rather than harmed by what we do. Point of view, seeing the world as a place wherein individuals and groups often act so as to harm innocent persons and creatures, seeing human beings as obligated to help rather than harm others. So these things are known to human beings. So why don't they follow it in an organized fashion? And that is a question which we should be asking. And the Quran does answer that. Then the values related to human rights. And this is interesting. We had looked at them very briefly under critical thinking. First is all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. If we remember the verse, Laqad karamna bani Adam. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. So these are very big words, but they are seldom followed. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Of course, this is a visible slavery, but the slavery which is created at all levels and is invisible, nobody talks of that. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. We know how much this is being followed. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family. Everyone has the right to education. Again, over here, the question for us is what type of education? Education to just produce labor for the industry. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kinds, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property or status. All are equal before the law. Again, we have to see what about if the law is unjust? And we have seen that laws are different across the world. The same human being is subjected to different laws. So this statement doesn't qualify that, does not explain that, and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Now, these are very big words which are written in these human rights, but we can see, look around and see how much these are being followed. The question for us is, if these are not being followed, what should we do? And we should look at the permanent values and see what do we find over there. Though the principles outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are universally accepted in theory, virtually every country violates them. There's no exception. Now, there are certain questions which are related to values, and I took them from a book by Brian Tracy. And these are very much in connection with individuals in a market economy, but I thought these are quite thought-provoking. What are your values? That is, what are my values at any point in time? What do you believe in? That is, what do I believe in at one point in time? What do you stand for? And equally important, what would you not stand for? So we have to define a bottom line that this is acceptable up to this point. I'm not going to accept it below that point. And this is important to understand that even in the world in which we live, we have to make a decision. I'm not going to accept if it comes to so low in terms of, let's say, human exploitation. Then is, do you believe in the values of honesty, sincerity, generosity, compassion, caring, love, forgiveness, and truth? Now, all these are big words, but what do these mean? That is the important point or a question for us. Do you believe in the value of integrity, personal excellence? Again, this is in relation to that success we want in this life, creativity, freedom, and self-expression. So these all have human connotations. Do you believe in the values of friendship, self-discipline, work, self-development, and success? So we need to question. Your ability to ask and answer these questions for yourself is the starting point of maximum achievement and personal greatness. So this is what I liked in this quote from this book, that it is making us think, and we can apply it to the permanent values as well. These answers are indispensable to unlocking your full potential. Now, how do we know what is our full potential? So the Quran points to that, which is far higher than what we get from the man-made system. And to your determining exactly what it is you really want from life. Now, this is the crux of that. What do we call life? And the Quran says physical life, of course, is life, but there is much more to it. When you know who you are inside, that is, I must know what is within me. Only then can you decide what you really want on the outside. So the world which we create around us is the world we change first within our own selves. And this is taken from this book by Brian Tracy, Create Your Own Future. Now, there are some definitions. Now, I have come slightly later in this presentation for definitions. I thought we should go through some of the general points, and then we'll be able to look at some of these definitions, which I have taken from Wikipedia and also from the dictionary. Values are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes or actions. They help us to determine what is important to us. That is, what is important for me. Values in a narrow sense is that which is good, desirable, or worthwhile. Values are the motive behind purposeful action. They are the ends to which we act and come in many forms. Next one is related to character values. We should keep in mind their general definitions of values, and then they're specific related to any particular field. Character values are the universal values that you need to exist as a good human being. Now, again, we have to define what is a good human being, a man-made system or the Quranic system. Work values. Work values are values that help you find what you want in a job and give you job satisfaction. We must have seen that all organizations have some written or unwritten values. And the organization wants us to conform to those values. Personal values, core values, again, we can look at that. The regard that something is held to deserve, that is something which we think is important, that becomes a value. The importance, worth, or usefulness, of something. Principles are standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. Estimate the monetary worth. So money in itself is a value as well. For example, cost benefit analysis emanates from this, that we always look at it, that what benefit I'm going to get, the money I'm going to spend. Consider someone or something to be important or beneficial and have a high opinion of. And the principles that help you to decide what is right and wrong and how to act in various situations. So over here, again, the question of right and wrong comes as well. And we did look at it in one of our presentations, that right and wrong has to be defined according to the Quran. And we have to bring our nafs into it, or the self into it. And we will discuss it once we come to subsequent talks in permanent values. Now, over here, we'll look at a schematic. Choice and intent, different paths needed different value systems. So we have choice and intent. Essentially, values we use when we make choices in life. If we are constrained within our environment, then we will have less choices, and obviously we will not be able to use some of the values. So in path one, may have a different set of values when we follow that path. In path two, we will have another different set of values. And path three, we can have a different one. So the path which we select can have its own values, or the values make us choose a certain path. Now, all paths end in physical death as far as this life is concerned, except one path called Sirat-e-Mustaqim. So we should keep it in mind that it doesn't matter which path we are following, and even if we are constrained to follow that path, we should keep in mind that there is a path which is Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And where does it go? It goes to the hereafter. The Quranic value system can lead to a successful life in the hereafter. So as the Quran says, Qibla, that is, we have to keep our focus on that particular aim. And that is where it is important to understand this whole value system. Now, prerequisites to accepting permanent values. These are some of the points which I thought we should share with each other. First one is understanding of the value system in which we live. For example, family values, social values of a society, values of various political parties, political values of a nation state, religious values, overall world values, individual values of people belonging to various classes, business values, economic values. So there is a lot of work we need to do. Understanding the sum total effect on the human life, on the individual and collective lives of people across the globe. So value system should, we must understand it so that we know what is the effect at individual level and what is the effect on the collective level. Understanding the two views of life on a continuous basis. We should know that people who believe or who say that life ends with death, what sort of a system they have. And if we say that the life goes beyond death, what sort of a system of deen we should have. Coming to this conclusion that the man-made system cannot work for the good of majority of mankind. Any doubts and lack of conviction will never lead to the acceptance of the permanent values. This is an important point on which I have paid a lot of attention and studied it very closely, that if we are satisfied with the system around us and not fully committed to the Quran, then the problem is that we will not be able to put concerted efforts towards understanding the permanent values and then accepting them and then coming together. So we will continue our efforts at individual level in a fragmented way. So this is important, that we should come to this conclusion that man-made systems cannot work for the good of majority of mankind. And it doesn't matter, even if I'm a beneficiary of a system, I should dissociate my own benefits from that system and then look at that system from the perspective of whole of mankind and bring hereafter into it. And then we will see that the permanent values of the Quran will start making sense. Acquiring Iman, 5 constituents with no exception, through a process of internal intense inquiry and desire to seek guidance. This is absolutely essential. It is a prerequisite. If we are not finding enough affinity towards permanent values, then we should go back to our own understanding of our own Iman. Now, this is a very much individual thing in which nobody else can help. Achieving a minimum threshold of Iman and absolute conviction achieved through evidence that without the system of Deen, the mankind can never be freed from fear and grief, conflicts, injustice, exploitation, all forms of slavery. If we remember, we covered under verse 230 what Malaika said. Malaika said that this man, oh Allah, who is being created, will create fasad, will create chaos and conflicts, and will shed blood. And then Quran said, Allah said in, I think, 238, chapter 2, verse 38, that surely we will send guidance towards you, and when you follow it, you will have no fear and grief. Then creating a desire, need, and motivation to acquire that self, new life, to work for it with those who strive on this path. Eliminate all kinds of dissonances and internal biases, prejudices, differences, jealousies, egoism, discriminations, rising to a very lofty eminence as a human being. And these are all individual things. That is why I said these are prerequisites for accepting, towards accepting permanent values. Do saleh deeds as defined by the Quran with a view to achieve the highest possible eminence of the self, using the Quran as an external criteria. Now, there are a few verses here which we will go through. I'll share it with you. First is, Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannata wa lamma yatikum matalul lazina khalaw min qablikum massatuhumul basa'u wa darra'u wa zulzilu hatta yaqul ar-rasulu wal lazina amanu ma'ahu mata nasrullah ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. So Quran says that, do you think that you shall enter Jannat just like those who came before you? And they encountered suffering, adversity, and were so shaken that even the Rasool and Mu'mineen with him said, when will come the help of Allah? The help of Allah is near. If we remember that chapter 2, verse 177, Quran says that this is a difficult path. But then it says that after every difficulty, then ease does come and it follows. So what we should keep in mind is that difficulties and challenges will come. And first, of course, is within the resistance which we find from within our own selves. And we should recognize that others will also find resistance. So this point, we should keep it in mind that we have to overcome our own inner resistances. And then it says, that human beings think that if they say that we accept Iman and there will not be any trials and tribulations, because we live in a wrong system. If we have a established Deen system, the children born in that will have less issues. But since we are in a man-made system, there will be resistance. And human beings don't give up things very easily. Those people who are used to the blood of others and exploiting others, they are not going to give up very easily. But we have to make an effort. وَلَقَدْ فَتَّنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ فَلَا يَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَا يَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So Quran says that we have, this whole word is created in a way that people, there will be trials and tribulations. And Allah has created in a way that those even before them, and Allah will certainly know those who are true from those who tell lies or who are not following the right path. So that is the way we should look at the world around us, that in this world we are following a different path, and this path will have issues and we will face some opposition. And then it says, this is a verse from Surah Taha, where I will not go through the whole of verse. It is regarding where Allah is addressing Hazrat Musa and says, behold, your sister goes ahead and says, shall I show you one who will nurse and rear? So we brought you back to your mother that her eyes may be cooled and she should not grieve. Then you did slay a man. That is where Hazrat Musa killed a man. but we saved you from stress and we put you through various trials in various ways. So the point over here is that he was put through various trials in various ways, but he did not know at that point in time. So whatever we are doing, we are put through different trials and tribulations in a world which is based on lies, which is a man-made system, which is not based on haqq, which is based on batil. Then did you live a number of years with the people of Madian? Then did you come here as Adrian or Musa? So important thing for us is that the path which we are following is a path of haqq, and we should not waver and keep striving on that together. Now, over here, I have just drawn a small schematic that there is an individual here, and then he has family and society. So he's got some values here. Then he's got the society and the family values over and above him. Then there is an education system which gives him values, and these are all at times conflicting. And then is nation state plus politics plus media, job, business, and religion, and own preferences. So one individual is subjected to so many value systems when it is a man-made world. And then the Quranic path is in which there is only one value system. All individuals subjected to same value system, immutable and no fear and grief. So we get a satisfaction that the first man had the same values and the last man will have the same values. So that is something we should keep in mind. I thought this indicates that how much burden we carry, and over here how simplified our burdens become, that we are subjected to only one set of values, and a satisfaction that everyone is subjected to the same value system. Now, what are the attributes of the permanent values? These do not change with time. Same values for the first man on the planet and the last man to leave this planet. These are factual and are functioning round the clock. So that is interesting. For example, law of requital functions whether we know it or not. The hereafter exists whether we know it or not. Law of respite exists whether we know it or not. Allah exists whether we know it or not. So these are some of the things which come to our mind. And if we look around, all natural laws exist, whether we are aware of them or not. And those who are aware of them can get benefit out of it. These are easy to understand if rational thinking is applied and can be empirically verified at both individual and collective level. Their understanding helps to expand the horizon of the human consciousness. This will become clear once we explain these values and their application. What I mean by expanding the human consciousness, over here, for example, all the presentations which we had, we have looked at various aspects of human life in the light of the Quran, and our consciousness has already expanded. A lot of things we now know which others don't know. These values help to get rid of all man-made chains, help create new life, and then help to grow it further. Very important that we have, all of us have shedded away, got rid of number of religious chains and other chains which were around our neck or around our consciousness. And as a result, the consciousness, we have made it free, and only we are now focused and with intensity on the Quran itself. Those who understand these values through Iman come together, and their differences due to the non-Quranic thinking gradually disappear, and they become brothers in the Quranic terminology. Very important point over here, which the Quran has elaborated in Watasimu bihablillahi jami'an wa la tafarraqu. And what Quran says, and we experience as well, that for example on this platform we all are focused towards the Quran. So if there are any differences, these gradually smoothen out and disappear, because we realize through our own education and training that Quran presents to us haqq, and haqq, when it comes, the differences must disappear. The light, when comes, the darkness must disappear. These differences arise because of differences, because of these psychological dissonances within human beings. Our own desires, emotions, feelings, sentiments. The brain continuously throws these things at us. But through the Quranic light, we recognize these darknesses and then keep on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. The search for these values from the Quran helps to delve deep into the system of Deen, and those who jointly focus on this and exploring all of their aspects emerge as an ummah as noted in 3:110. Once the requisite iman strengthens in these values and the collective human self reaches the status of bir, where deen as a concept and a system starts to become a reality. Understanding these values, the whole of the Quran helps to formulate subclauses and bylaws to meet the requirements of the time in which we live. So these things become very clear as we will go through various permanent values. And we should keep in mind that the Quran as a whole is also a permanent value. So permanent value has more permanent values within itself. These values, together with the manifestations of the divine attributes by Mu'mineen, help to establish the system of deen by going through the transition phases of converting from the man-made systems to the Islamic system. Now, we look at some of the barriers which we may experience to learning permanent values. And we should keep in mind that these are not only for us, these are for others as well. We can recognize it in others as well. For example, I should recognize all the barriers which might come from my own inner self in understanding some of the Quranic verses. First is egocentric thinking and not becoming aware of it. If we remember, we covered this aspect in some detail under critical thinking. Egocentric thinking is inbuilt within us. We think that what I believe is correct, or what majority believes is correct, without putting it to some kind of a test, some kind of a criteria. I know everything and do not need to learn more. There is no upper limit to bear. This is a terrible restriction which human beings place on themselves. This means literally intellectual death. Because if I thought that I have learned everything, then what am I going to learn in the hereafter? What am I going to do in the hereafter? Where the life, human life on Sirat-e-Mustaqim is never going to end. And if nafs has to go on, and if I thought nafs has learned whatever it was supposed to learn, then I have literally committed intellectual suicide. So we must keep this in mind and continuously intellectually look at our own inner self as well as the self of others and guide them and help them and draw their attention. I do not need guidance. I already know what is given in the Quran and that meets my needs. This is again connected with the upper one. It is something which we should never, ever even let it cross our mind. I do not need others and can figure it out individually myself. We need to remember that the self not developed as part of the collective effort cannot be of much use for the system of deen, even when it is established. Itself will not have that part which relates to collective efforts. We all go through these phases, and I also thought that way at some point in time in the past for a very short period. Individually, we cannot change any system. Deen requires individuals, mu'mineen, to come together. وَتَعْصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. They have to come together. And if we do not come together, even if we understand the Quran extremely well, then our self will not understand that collective part of it. So even if, for example, let's assume deen is established, such individuals will have to go through the process of that education and training which is required within a collective system. So we do not have an option on that. Wherever we are, if we are on the pure Quranic form, we should seek out those who are trying to look into the system of deen. All religions and nations have permanent values, hence no need for the system of deen. This is another very big pitfall. We should get rid of that, because this comes when we think if we are a beneficiary of a system, we try to justify it so that we don't have to make a lot of effort to change it. But over here, we are changing first our own inner self. At least we should make full effort to smoothen out and get rid of all those chains which are tying us down in this life. What about those who do not accept Iman, are not aware of it, are not given message, but do good charitable deeds? Will Allah send them to hell? Now, this is another question which it comes to our mind, and it comes to every mind. But answer to this lies within our own inner self, and of course, the understanding of the Quran. If we go through the Quran says that when human beings will come to the next life, none of them will say that I did not do it. I did it. So we are dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows the secrets of our hearts. So we should leave it there. What is my responsibility is to understand the Quran first, be unhappy with the man-made system, and then make an effort towards establishing deen and join hands with those who are making efforts in that direction. And TOLU Islam provides that platform. So this is something which we need to understand and convince ourselves. Lack of complete empathy for yatim and miskeen in the world, struggle to relate to wider mankind beyond own biological family and circle of close friends. We must get out of our biological relationships as far as our thinking is concerned, because we are all human beings and we have to rise above that. We should look around the yatim and miskeen and then just see that what is happening in, for example, in India and Pakistan at present through this pandemic. People are suffering, and they're suffering because it's a man-made system. Become focused on a narrow aspect of the Quran and lose sight of the holistic concept of deen. There is a point here which I would like to comment on, that if we are satisfied with a small part of the Quran and get on with that, and we think that is enough for me, we are missing a far bigger picture of deen and the pleasure and enjoyment of following that. And hereafter depends on understanding that. If we have an opportunity, and for example, this platform where we are trying to share these higher aspects of life and looking at various aspects of the Quran, then it is important for us to create that desire. The difficulty is this is an individual thing. Nobody has access to the self of another human being. And that is where we must understand. Do not fully come to terms with the intrinsic connection between Iman and Saleh deeds. This is absolutely connection. I call it a permanent value, and we will discuss it at some point in time. Have doubts about the possibility of getting Allah's help against the man-made systems. Do not take into account the emergent evolution of Rahman. This prevents from putting one's maximum effort in the direction of deen. That we have to convince ourselves that there is an alternative to man-made system, and for that we can get Allah's help. Without going into the details, how will we get this help? The point here is that we should raise the level of ourselves, its eminence, to that where we become eligible for getting Allah's help. Are fearful of opposition, non-Quranic people, religious people, rich and powerful. And for that reason, we should come together and stay together. Because once we are together, then we can counter all these effects. People who are weak, people who are non-Quranic will always oppose it because they are following their own desires. They don't know what exactly they are doing. And that is why when somebody who is higher in intellect and is trying to reason with them, they will always oppose it because they lose their immediate benefits, not realizing that in the long term, they will get far more benefits than the miserable and fearful life they are living at present. Self-doubts and unsure about their own self and its abilities. And this can be eliminated by working together rather than in isolation. And life is self-imposed limitations for various reasons. Only one himself can resolve these issues of the self. We should come to these terms that I only have access to myself. My inner self is within my control, and it is not in the control of somebody else. So if all of us can resolve these issues through mutual discussion and through these presentations and talks and question answers, that will be a great achievement. Finally, let's look at some of the verses. If we remember, we talked of bir. Lan tanalul birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbuna wa ma tunfiqu min shay'in fa inna Allaha bihi alim. That you will not acquire bir. So over there it was said, bir is not this. Over it says, Quran says that you will not acquire bir unless you give freely of what you love. See, our default position is that we love wealth, because it gives us power, it fulfills our desires, it gives us a certain standard of living. But Quran says you have to go against it. وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. Over here there is a value, alim is given. Then it says, Telka ayatullah natluha alayka bil haq. Again, haq is stated here, that these are the signs of Allah. We rehearse them to you in haq. So Allah says that we tell you about these. وَمَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And then Quran says that injustice doesn't come from Allah. Injustice comes from your own self. But Allah means no injustice to any and all words. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله ولو آمن أهل الكتاب لكان خيرا لهم منهم المؤمنون وأكثرهم الفاسقون. So over here, see, the Quran says that these are the people, that is the mu'mineen of Rasulullah's time, that you have emerged, come out, risen from among mankind. And what do? There are two values here. Ta'muruna bil ma'rufi wa tanhauna 'anil munkar. And as a result, wa tu'minuna billah. See, iman comes here, linked with these permanent values. Walau amana ahlul kitabi lakana khairal lahum. If people of the book had come to this, they would have found it would have been good for them. And there are some who have become mu'mineen, but others are fasik, that is, they are outside the pattern. And then Quran says, Watlu ma uhiya ilayka min kitabi rabbika la mubaddila li kalimatihi walan tajida min dunihi multahada. That this book has been sent to you so that you recite it. And then it says, La mubaddila li kalimatihi, that Allah does not, these do not change, these words do not change. See, over here, the whole Quran is presented as a permanent values, that it will not change. And this is a great satisfaction, that the law is applicable to everyone. And then Quran says, and none will find as a refuge other than him. And then we must have this conviction developed within us, that the word will not change unless we take it out of the man-made laws. Now, conclusions. First one is, we as human beings have been endowed with free will so that we can make choices in our earthly life. These choices lead to our actions in life, and these leave an impression on ourselves. Our choices are influenced by the value system which we follow. For example, our beliefs, laws of the land, institutional values, political values, economic values, social norms and values, religious values. And then our desires and emotions direct our intellect whether to follow these values or go against these values. Going against the man-made value systems can incur punishment, and going with the man-made value systems reward us proportionate to our status, possessions, wealth, and etc. So if we are beneficiaries of the man-made systems, that does not mean that the system is right. That means we are benefiting because we are part of the wrong side of the system, whereas the system should be for the good of whole of mankind. We are burdened by various layers of value system, visible and not so visible, as we live our life. And all these are based on the assumption that the human life ends with physical death. This is something which we should continuously look at, that the man-made system is based on this particular assumption that the life ends with physical death. And we know that the life does not end with physical death. Of course, we also know that we need a life based on Iman and Amal Saleh. The Quran gives us immutable permanent value system as part of Deen. Since it consists of the permanent values from Allah, hence these help create that precise environment in which human self can achieve the highest possible eminence in this life. This is, I'll again emphasize, we can get the highest possible eminence in this life. And that is important that we discuss it together. It's not an individual thing. A lot of aspects will never come before us unless we look at them coming together. And of course, it will help to bind our hearts together. Firstly, it can fully understand it, and then gradually through Iman and Saleh deeds can reach the lofty heights of human consciousness. If we want to have a brilliant, very wide horizon and consciousness, and it's free, because thinking is free. We can be a gardener or a laborer, or we can be owner of a factory, doesn't make any difference. We have to think, reflect. The Quran calls it new life and a light which enlightens not only the paths of Mu'mineen, but helps to make others understand it, so that we will be in a position to pass it on to others. Already we have seen that through these presentations, those who are more actively participating, we have come together, and hopefully others who do not see much value in attending these meetings, which is fine, will come to it at some point in time. And thank you for listening.